This is it, folks. The final chunk of books to close out the core narratives of the individual Heroes Reborn titles. After this, it's nothing but crossovers and earth-shattering events. So let's play some catch-up real quick, since it's been a while since we touched base with the Avengers. Where did we leave the team at? The android Vision remains comatose after his run-in with Kang the Conqueror. His creator, Hank Pym, used some micron gas, which will never sound as cool as Pym particles, to shrink down into the Ant-Man and went inside the synthezoid, hoping to save his robot son. His other robot son, the increasingly spiky and thummy Ultron, cut Pym's lifeline, leaving him stranded inside. The Scarlet Witch has been lured away as part of a plan between Loki and the Enchantress, who claims that the witch is her daughter. The Swordsman had both of his hands crushed during the Hulk's attack on Avengers Island, leaving the team of Captain America, Thor, Hawkeye, and Hellcat to deal with the events of the Industrial Revolution. The armored Iron Man helped the team out and then joined the team and secured their independence from S.H.I.E.L.D. Whew. Busy. And it only gets crazier from here, trust me. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 1.10, Avengers Reborn, Part 2. Issue 7 is the last one that Rob Liefeld and Jeff Loeb wrote, and the covers promises a who's who of Avengers villains. The Enchantress hefts Mjolnir triumphantly, flanked by Wonder Man with Cap's shield, a guy that I'm betting is the Executioner, and Ultron, who has Iron Man's faceplate. It only occurred to me as I sat down to write this that the cast all have a token from the Avengers, who I'm super sure that they'll beat, except for the Executioner. Sorry, dude, did no one tell you the theme of this photo shoot? We'll add something in post, maybe one of Hawkeye's broken arrows or something. Inside the issue, Loki lounges upon a throne of skulls as he moans of his fate. He knows that he's in an alternate reality, and yet, even still, he is vexed by Thor and the Avengers. The Enchantress then appears, informing Loki that everything is ready. The mischief can finally begin. As the remains of Avengers Island, Iron Man and Nick Fury are finishing off the Move the Avengers Out checklist. Really, the only thing left is the Vision, who Fury declares will be staying with S.H.I.E.L.D. Iron Man protests. Every Avenger was to be allowed to choose whether or not to stay with S.H.I.E.L.D. or to go. S.H.I.E.L.D., obviously, disagrees. You see, the Vision was built by Hank Pym, who was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time of his construction. Thus, anything he designed was, in fact, S.H.I.E.L.D. property. Unwilling to let this stand, Iron Man threatens to just take the Vision. Half a dozen guns materialize around the Avenger. So long as the Vision is offline and Hank Pym is missing, the Vision will be staying with S.H.I.E.L.D. Iron Man promises that they aren't done here, but leaves Fury to his business. As much as I don't normally like the man-to-man posturing that Rob Liefeld likes to put in all of his books, I really like this scene. It's a little weird for Iron Man to be so protective of the Vision, given that Tony is new to the team and actually never met the Vision at all, but let's assume he's doing it for his old college friend Hank. Iron Man and Fury both feel like themselves, and I love the work-for-hire jab. For those not in the know, when an artist or writer did work for Marvel or DC, traditionally, that work is then owned by those companies. All of it. Did you create Superman? Want to take that character and tell your own stories? Well, too bad, he's owned by DC. And legally, there is very little a person could do to change that. The Schuster family has fought DC many times over the years for ownership of the Superman brand, and they've had some small monetary victories, but he remains the intellectual property of DC. While I'm specifically bringing up Superman, DC isn't the only company to do this. Marvel works the same way. Now, add in the fact that Liefeld is one of the guys who left Marvel to found Image Comics, specifically looking for creative control, full ownership of his work, and more money. This isn't just a clever way for S.H.I.E.L.D. to keep custody of the Vision, it's a jab at the way the big two run their businesses. And while this is pure coincidence, I love that the last issue that Liefeld did of Avengers is the one that has this comment. Now, in all fairness, Jeff Loeb also wrote this issue, so it's possible that the dialogue is 100% his. Either way, I think that this is a fun little poke. The camera then zooms into the Vision and we find Hank Pym alive and on the run. He recaps his situation, explaining that while the Vision is offline, his immune systems are still going strong. The interior of his body keeps shifting density while techno-antibodies try to gun Hank down. He fights back with his suit, insect legs popping up from the back to strike an antibody. That's when the floor phases beneath him and he falls, the landing knocking him out. While the whole shrink a guy and send him into another person story has been done before, it's interesting to see the guy who, so far, has only appeared in a lab in this life or death situation. I also like this iteration of the Ant-Man suit, although it is incredibly blocky. The suit feels more like a defensive exoskeleton than a superhero costume, and it evokes the look of an insect more than the classic costume. I can totally understand why this design dies with the Heroes Reborn universe, but personally, I kind of dig it. Thinking about this suit, and the Vision, sent me on a weird mental tangent. I can't help but wonder if the work that Hank did on the Prometheum armor in college helped lead to these two creations. How cool would it be if Hank was the guy who programmed Tony's armor, then took that basic design and evolved it into the Vision? Perhaps even inspired by the suit's failure with Rebel and Victor. If no human can safely pilot the suit, have the suit pilot itself. Oh, that is so cool. I love it. I really don't think that's where this is going, or came from, and what a missed opportunity that is. That would have been such a nice, tight little piece of continuity. Iron Man is joined by Thor, whose hammer has taken on a more classic look with a regular handle length as opposed to the staff hammer that he's been using, as he crosses town to the new Avengers mansion. Originally owned by Stark's father, Tony never had a use for it before, but putting up the Avengers feels right to him. The mansion is protected by a solid air force field, programmed to recognize the Avengers' biological signatures. Then they're scanned at the front door, and the mansion counts Mjolnir as a sentient being. We've seen Thor go drinking with Mjolnir in this book, gazing at the hammer longingly. What is Liefeld up to here? I'll never know after this issue. It's killing me. Thor comments that there's no manservant to greet them, and Iron Man scoffs. You mean, like a butler or something? After what happened on Avengers Island, no sane person would take the job. That's a solid jab at Jarvis, the Avengers' longtime butler who did not pass through Onslaught and thus shouldn't be in the Reborn world. Neither were the Swordsman or Hellcat, but who are we to put inconsistent storytelling down? There's a quick jump to Salem, where Wanda's teacher, the witch Agatha Harkness, who also didn't go into Onslaught if we're keeping track, is still trapped as a tree by Loki. Her familiar, a black cat named Ebony, pleads for her to escape, and she finally does. Agatha's mind possesses Ebony's body, and she takes off, eager to help the girl who was like a daughter to her. I'm glad that Agatha wasn't completely forgotten in all of this madness. Then we move to Hawkeye, who was down in Argentina? Whiskey Tango Foxtrot? Hawkeye and another man, Reaper, are on a mission, and Hawk suggests that they head back. They are way off the map, but Reaper shuts him down. If they can find their target, then Fury will rethink this whole Avengers thing and put them in charge of it. But that's when things go wrong. Lasers erupt from everywhere, slicing Reaper's right hand off. The injured man tells Hawkeye to finish the mission, to tell Fury that Zemo is alive, but Hawk won't listen. Reaper is too important to him. He's Hawkeye's only... That's where the hologram ends thanks to Hellcat. Hawk is pretty angry, but she's fine with it. She can't just leave him alone to replay the past. She was on that first mission too, and nobody blames him for what happened to Reaver. What is that you say? Hold the phone, Catwoman. That changes things. There was a group called the Avengers before this group, and it was more Black Opsy? I love that! And clearly so did others, because we've seen similar ideas pop up in the Ultimate line of titles, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the mainline Avengers books. That also helps to explain why Fury told Cap about the Avengers. Cap didn't help found them at all here, he just helped make them public figures. Oh, this is perhaps your coolest idea out of all this mess, Mr. Liefeld. The inclusion of Reaper is an interesting one, too. The Grim Reaper is classically a villain, armed with a scythe where his missing right hand should be. Personally, I think he's always looked stupid and is a lame villain, so the change here is welcome. He's got a skull-like face mask on, although it's half covered with some techno garbage for seemingly no reason. I don't know, I like the idea of him being a stealthier, more lethal character. I do want to mention that I think Rob Liefeld has something against characters named Reaper. Over in the opening issues of Volume 1 of X-Force that Liefeld helped to write and draw at the time, there was a villain character named Reaper who was a member of the Mutant Liberation Front. And Liefeld's run is really kind of famous for bringing a lot more like graphic violence to Marvel's X-Men books. And in one scene, Shatterstar chops off Reaper's hand. And then I believe once that hand is replaced by a cybernetic hand, Shatterstar chops off his other hand. And so now here in the Heroes Reborn universe, we have another Reaper get another hand chopped off. I don't know if Liefeld's going for some kind of like reaping the Reaper joke here, but it's just kind of weird and a weird fixation. I like it. It also... All of this makes me wonder if Hellcat was already a Catwoman when that mission went down. She says that she was on the team, but we don't see her in flashback, either in her previous form or as a Catwoman. Was there anybody else on that team? I don't know. I'll never know. These books are over. They're done. What happened to them? I'll never know. I did find an interesting theory regarding this scene during some of the research that I was doing on the Heroes Reborn books. On a site called White Rocket Books, author Adrian Watts did his own summary of the Heroes Reborn related Avengers stuff, and he presents a fan theory about Hawkeye's real identity that I like. The basic gist of it is that Hawkeye is actually Simon Williams, the character in the 616 universe who is classically known as Wonder Man. All of the evidence is pretty light, but it kinda sorta adds up. I'll put the link in the description for this episode, so if you're interested, go check it out. I'm not going to go into it in more detail here because it's not confirmed and it's not my theory, and I don't want to steal some other person's thunder. Anyway, Captain America visits the swordsman, who is being kept in the medical bay. Cap believes that the swordsman wanted to prove himself to Captain America. That's why he tried to fight the Hulk. But Cap was already impressed by him because he gave everything into being an Avenger. To Cap, he is a hero. This scene is meant to be touching, but it really misses the mark for me. While I believe that Cap respected the swordsman's willingness to train and fight, he'd been pretty hard on him each time that they appeared together. Swordsman outright said that Cap didn't think much of him during their last training session. Now, Cap shut that down, commenting that he doesn't make snap judgments about people. Did Cap respect him then and just not tell him? Or is he feeling guilty over the loss of a soldier under his command? I'd take either, really, if it made this scene pop a little more. Ultimately, there is no interpersonal relationship here to make this scene into anything more than hollow. A powerful banging at the door draws everyone's attention. Apparently, the medical bay is on the main floor of the mansion. I mean, I guess that makes sense. What if someone is critically hurt? You want to get them patched up as soon as possible. But it also feels weirdly unlike a superhero mansion, you know? Superhero mansions classically have their med bays below the surface, allowing the upper portion to retain some semblance of normality. I mean, I'm complaining here, but I'm not really complaining here. This isn't inherently a good or bad thing. It just kind of threw me off to see Captain America in the hallway with everybody else. Vowing to hire a butler, Thor answers the door himself. A man dressed in an ugly green and purple costume staggers inside, asking for help. As Thor moves to help him, the stranger balls his fist and sucker punches the god. The rest of the Avengers assemble and are introduced to the Lethal Legion by the Enchantress. That ugly costume-wearing fella is Wonder Man, by the way, and we've got the rest of the crew as named on the cover. Given all the security that the mansion has, Iron Man orders a diagnostic and demands to know why the intruders weren't labeled as hostile. And that's when the Legion's final member is revealed to be the Scarlet Witch. Oh yeah, things are coming together. For a Liefeld-Loeb production, this issue worked for me. Other than the Cap swordsman scene, I enjoyed pretty much all of this. We caught up with everyone nicely, dropped some interesting backstory bits, and ended on a nice cliffhanger. I have to admit that Wonder Man feels really thrown in here. I mean, Enchantress is allied with Loki, so that's cool, and the Executioner classically hangs out with the Enchantress. The Scarlet Witch is either ensorcelled or faking her allegiance, but again, she's supposed to be connected to the Enchantress in this. But Wonder Man? What the crap is he doing here? And Ultron too, how did he learn of this whole thing? Did Loki or the Enchantress contact him? And if so, how? And when? And why is he against the Avengers? So far, Ultron's subplot has mostly been him crushing on Janet Van Dyne and plotting to kill Hank Pym, neither of which he can accomplish here. This guy is supposed to be one of the Avengers' greatest foes, but he feels like an afterthought. This is also Ian Churchill's last issue on the book, and it's gorgeous. Every page and panel is packed with prodigious precision details, whether it's the Vision's veins of wires and circuits or the leafy jungles of Argentina. It took 3 inkers, Larry Strucker, John Sybal, and Norm Rapmund, to finish this issue. I'm going to be sad to see you go, Mr. Churchill. Well, now that we're right in the middle of a big fight scene, let's change the creative team. Walt Simonson was called in to finish this volume of Avengers, and I am excited for it. I've mostly only seen Simonson's work, as he can both write and draw, and this is one of the few books he's written that I own. Simonson is perhaps best known as a Thor author, writing it from 1983 to 1987. This is the guy who did the Turn Thor into a Frog storyline and created Better Rate Bill. So yeah, compared to Liefeld and Loeb's work, I am stoked to be going into this. We also have the addition of Michael Ryan on pencils. I really like Ryan's artwork, having seen it on Brian K. Vaughan's Mystique, Nunzio and DePhillip's New X-Men Academy X, and New Excalibur. He does a great job with the heroes' frames and bodies, he does great facial expression, and is a very detail-oriented artist. One of the things that always bums me out about his work is that Ryan only tends to do maybe 5 or 6 issues before he needs a break on a book. In this case, that actually works out great because Avengers has an impending ending coming up. Huzzah! Simonson starts us off in the skies above Peru, where we find Kang the Conqueror lamenting his recent loss to the Avengers. Mantis rationally explains that whether or not she loves him has nothing to do with beating the Avengers. Like, her feelings and his ability to beat people up are not connected. At all. But she's a girl, and she doesn't understand, and Kang will have his revenge. Which is when a shadowy figure speaks, surprising Kang in his own sanctuary. This man then turns Kang into pure energy and absorbs him. Whoa. Shocked and horrified, Mantis is unable to stop the same thing from happening to herself. The, shadowy figure is actually pretty easy to suss out by his silhouette and speech patterns, but I'll save that for the big reveal down the line. What a lame way for a guy like Kang to go, though. Back at Avengers Mansion, the heroes mix it up with the Lethal Legion. Iron Man activates the ground security measures, allowing Captain America to destroy Ultron. Like, totally destroy him. Again, I was really surprised how easily another of the Avengers' major foes went down. A pissed-off Thor decks Wonder Man into La La Land, while sonic arrows is enough to stop the Executioner. Lethal Legion? More like the Lame Legion, am I right? That's about when the Enchantress calls the fight off, teleporting away with the Scarlet Witch. She leaves the rest of the Legion as unimpressed by them as I am. The fight has left questions in Cap's mind. Kang, the Hulk, and the Legion's attacks make Cap feel like someone is targeting the Avengers. To me, that just sounds crazy. No one was manipulating the Hulk or Kang. They each had their own reasons to fight the Avengers. Unless Cap's fourth wall senses are kicking in and he means the actual authors of the Avengers book? Thor has his own questions regarding the Executioner. If Ragnarok has already happened, which is why there would be no Asgard, then where did the Executioner come from? He doesn't mention the Enchantress at all, but maybe he didn't see her in his battle rage? Weak explanation, I know, but I'm not the one who wrote this issue. Cap moves on to the question of securing their prisoners. They don't really have a place to put them. Thor shrugs and volunteers to kill them. Iron Man is kind of down with that idea, something that I do not like. When Iron Man faced Whirlwind in his own book, he regretted accidentally killing the man. Shifting him to pragmatically murderous here is just incredibly off. Naturally, Cap shoots the idea down and decides to call Nick Fury for cleanup instead. But Fury is already there, master spy that he is, and after exchanging some really stiff banter, he does indeed take the villains into custody. Cap inquires if S.H.I.E.L.D. has searched for Kang's ship at all, and Fury goes off. I don't know why Nick is so sensitive over the issue. The Avengers might have walked away from him, but they're still good guys. But no, they haven't found Kang. No, you can't have the Vision back. And then he threatens to have the IRS go through Cap's taxes. What the hell is that supposed to be? Cap takes this pretty calmly because I'm pretty sure that he knows that's as stupid as I do, stating that he's more worried about all of these old foes reappearing and why they're so easy to beat. But what the hell is he talking about? This was the first time that the Reborn Avengers faced the Lethal Legion at all. They aren't old foes. And why is he so concerned about how easy they are? It's not like he has any experience to compare this fight against. I really want to say that Simonson clearly missed some details in this book, but Cap then goes on to request meetings with Zemo, MODOK, and any AIM agents that Fury has in custody. That's a fight that just happened in Captain America issue 6, so Simonson was clearly paying some attention. Fury protests over this, given that Steve just quit S.H.I.E.L.D. in issue 7 of his own book, so he doesn't owe Cap anything. But he wants answers too, so he okays it. Neither man gets the chance, though. The scene moves to the helicarrier, where the not-so-mystery figure turns all of these guys into energy and absorbs them as well. Elsewhere in the carrier, Ant-Man has reached the last place he's yet to check in the Vision, his cranium. Now, I know that a robot doesn't have to have its brain in its head, but we intuitively believe that's where the brain is, right? So if the Vision just stopped working, you'd think that his brain would be the first thing that Pym would have checked, yes? Is it just me? Okay. Ant-Man finds that the Vision's memory is overclocked, moving faster than Pym ever dreamed it could. He plugs into one of the Vision's internal ports, makes some kind of dramatic discovery, and is electrocuted into unconsciousness. Man, Hank, you sure do get knocked out inside your robot pretty often. Cap and Fury then discover that their prisoners are missing, and we get 2 pages of Fury freaking out over it. 2 pages! And then we move on, catching up with the Agatha-possessed Ebony as she approaches Avengers Mansion. An energy blast hits her first, appearing to kill her? Maybe she's just paralyzed. Yeah, let's go with paralyzed. Oh, maybe she's like a Pokemon and she's just knocked out. Okay, cool. I can live with that. Inside the mansion, the rest of the Avengers are cleaning up after the mess made by the Legion. And then the Masters of Evil show up. What happened to your solid air force field, Tony? Your biosignature scanning defenses? Glad we spent like 2 pages discussing all of these non-existent defensive measures. Whatever. We've got the Black Knight, Radioactive Man, Claw, the Master of Sound, the Melter, and an Alive Again Whirlwind? Different guy, same costume? Continuity error? I'm gonna go with continuity error. So they start to attack the Avengers, and we end there, shifting to Wonder Man and the Executioner's shared cell. The shadowy figure is revealed to be Loki, and the Executioner thinks that he's an ally. But nah, psych man. Loki's come to realize that they share no bond, they are not Asgardians. They're merely unfinished ideas from someone else's imagination. But Loki plans to outgrow his creator, and then he turns the 2 men into energy, absorbing them and thus ending the issue. I really hope that Simonson has a reason why Loki isn't just turning the Avengers into energy and absorbing them. It seems like it's a pretty quick process, so I'm confident that he could pull it off. Otherwise, this was a pretty tough read. Simonson does his best to salvage a plot from where Liefeld and Loeb left off. I haven't even tried to figure out how or if any of this works with Robinson's Captain America run, because that makes my head hurt. This is a rough start, but god dang if it don't look pretty. Shockingly, the Avengers and the Masters of Evil go at it in issue 9. The Masters are beaten really easily. I mean, it doesn't even feel worth mentioning how it happened. Thor just decks Claw, Hawkeye knocks Whirlwind into the Black Knight, and then they fall on Radioactive Man. Iron Man brags to Melter about making some adjustments to his armor, including a refractory coating. He makes a joke about it being called Exo-4 and that it's not used in toothpaste, which I don't get at all. Was this some kind of news story that happened in the late 90s about crap being in toothpaste? This is a complete miss to me. Thor orders Hawkeye to bring the criminals around to him so that he can kill them, ending their threat. He's stopped, though, by the arrival of Captain America, who has returned from his trip to the helicarrier and now sports the A on his forehead, thus further complicating the Captain America Avengers continuity relationship. Cap goes on to mention how proud he is of the Avengers for standing on their own, but so long as he's leading him, they will only avenge crimes, not commit them. Unhappy with this, Thor declares that maybe he shouldn't be an Avenger, and flies off angrily. Hawkeye snidely comments that the Avengers don't need him, and then walks off. Hellcat declares that since she was useless in the fight, that maybe she shouldn't be an Avenger either, and also storms off. Tony comments about how easy this fight was, like Cap did with the Legion, so they need to ask some questions. They ask the Black Knight why the Masters attacked them. The Knight explains that if they beat the Avengers, they'd have money, fame, babes, everything that makes life livable, you know? How defeating the Avengers would do this, I don't know. Iron Man comments about how lame these guys are, and Cap agrees. He leaves Iron Man to question them further. He needs to visit the swordsman for I don't know why. Then there's a short scene where Loki and the Enchantress talk. The God of Lies says that the Avengers have prepared a feast for him, leading me to believe that he's probably going to energy eat the Masters of Evil. He asks for her aid in further driving Thor away from the Avengers, and despite wisely not trusting Loki, she goes along with it. Back at Avengers Mansion, Iron Man has finished manacling the Masters when Janet Van Dyne shows up. Despite never having met Iron Man yet, and a lack of response from the security system, Janet tells Iron Man about the fact that Hank is missing, which he should have known because Fury said Pym was nowhere to be found in issue 7. Iron Man reasons that Hank went missing shortly after the Vision was put into his coma, and Hank would want to know why. So, despite Iron Man being Tony Stark's bodyguard and not knowing Hank Pym at all, Iron Man figures that he knows Pym well enough to figure out where he is. And rather than calling S.H.I.E.L.D. to get the Masters and a lift, Iron Man picks up Jan and they fly off to the helicarrier. Once they're gone, Loki and the Scarlet Witch appear and he energy eats the Masters of Evil. But then he rants that the more energy he consumes, the less of it there is. Which, I mean, that happens when you eat something. The real takeaway here is that he vows to consume everything, and then he'll feed on the heroes. That's a plan I'm still not sold on, but we're barely into it, so let's give it some more time. Over in the Vision's body, Hank finally comes to. He plugs back into the Vision to confirm his discovery from last issue. Someone has been extracting memories from the Vision, and it's being transmitted to Avengers Mansion? Well, that's weird. Unwilling to let the Vision be anyone's pawn, Hank disconnects some stuff, which stops the transmission. He then exits the Vision and is relieved to see Jan and, I've still never met you, but we'll act like old friends, Iron Man. You'd think Hank would comment on Stark using the armor that killed Rebel or something, but nah, that's not important. Fury is also surprised to see Iron Man and Jan in his helicarrier. Of course Fury knew that Pym was in the Vision. That's why he wanted to keep the Vision's body. He now intends to debrief Hank about what happened in there, but Pym explains that the Vision is dead. Determined to be a pain in the butt, Fury demands to know how Iron Man got on board. Explaining, again, that Stark Industries built the carrier does nothing to calm Fury. He orders them to hand over Ant-Man and surrender. Out of nowhere, Jan shrinks to wasp size and prepares to defend Hank. But a sudden burst of ozone from the Vision throws everyone off. Iron Man's readings show that the android is about to explode. He grabs the body, punches through the wall, and manages to toss the Vision before he detonates. While the carrier was saved, the Wasp, Ant-Man, and Iron Man flee the scene anyway, and Iron Man gets a call to return to Avengers Mansion. An angry Fury demands that Iron Man be tracked and found, which seems pretty pointless because the Avengers only have 2 bases, and at some point he's going to return to Avengers Mansion, and you should just stake it out. And wasn't the mansion under surveillance anyways? Otherwise, how did Fury respond to the attack by the Lethal Legion so quickly? These little things are really starting to add up, Mr. Simonson, and it is an ugly picture. In Manhattan, Thor is brooding over the utter lack of raving, pillaging, and death. I mean, what is the point of life if you aren't killing someone? God! Which is when the Enchantress shows up to beguile him. And she straight up mentions that she's allied with Loki, but they're going to change the world and Thor should help. Thor comments that his mind has been confused since leaving the Amber, and I'm choosing to believe that the Enchantress is ensorcelling his mind because they ally and then make out. In the hospital where Swordsman is, he was last shown in the Avengers Mansion medbay, another minor error that screams at me, Cap discovers that he's been disappeared, although a nurse reports seeing blue smoke in his room. Looks like Loki has been here too. Iron Man goes into round 2 of phone tag and tells Cap to get to Avengers Island ASAP. God, this issue cuts around a lot. We bounce over to Avengers Mansion first, where Loki discovers that his probe into the Vision's mind is gone because the Vision is gone. Realizing that the Avengers are closing in, he needs to make his next move. He turns to the Scarlet Witch, but she's gone. Elsewhere in the mansion, Hellcat laments both her appearance and her lack of usefulness in the Avengers. Just as she's ready to pack it in and call it quits, the Scarlet Witch enters the room asking after Captain America. Hellcat launches herself at Wanda, enraged by the traitor. Wanda defends herself, explaining that they can't waste any time. Loki hasn't trusted her for a second, which is when he blasts her in the back. Freezing Wanda with a spell, Loki goes to work on Hellcat. He offers her the Scarlet Witch's body. It would be a simple thing to switch their minds, finally giving Hellcat the kind of life that she deserves. Finally, we join our other heroes at Avengers Island, returning to the shockingly not detonated on top of the Hulk Gamma Core. Iron Man, Cap, Ant-Man, and I guess that she's the Wasp now, are also surprised to see energy projections of the Super Adaptoid, the Grim Reaper, and the Living Laser, their old foes. These Avengers didn't ever fight the Adaptoid, or, you know what, it's not worth it. Moving on. Iron Man blasts at them and they disperse, but the energy in the core is still building. Tony's armor then reads a non-radioactive nexus within the Gamma Core, saying that it's like a crack in the universe. The energy builds and out steps Thor, God of Thunder? Whiskey Tango Foxtrot? Now, for clarity's sake, this appears to be classic Thor, appearing as he was best known pre-Onslaught. And I'm really thrown by this. Even knowing that there are 2 Thors on the covers for issue 10 and 11, I still didn't see this coming. Other than an impending clash with Loki, I have no idea where this is going. Before I move on to issue 10, I'd like to briefly touch upon the death of the Vision. I'm far from the biggest Avengers fan, much less a Vision fan, but what a lame usage. I'm not even referring to his role as accidental informant for Loki, but rather how no one treats him like a person. What's always made the Vision a great character is his humanity, his soul, and his friends in the Avengers know this. But Hank kills the Vision with not a thought, a creature that is basically his son, and there's nothing. Iron Man chucks his body out of the helicarrier without a thought or tear. But Ben, you cry, you kept pointing out that Iron Man hadn't interacted with all of these characters. Isn't that true of the Vision? And yeah, I'm doubling up on the standard here, but if we're short-handling relationships anyways, then do all of the relationships. This seems like such a waste of one of the Avengers' most notable members. Sorry, Vision. We don't waste any time between issues, picking up right up where we left off. Thor dispels the energy from the Gamma Core and is overjoyed to see that his friends have made it into Valhalla. Cap seems to recognize this iteration of Thor, even mentioning his previous costumes pre-Onslaught. Thor agrees that there is something different about himself, most notably his return to his classic costume. He also comments on the design for the Prometheum armor as if it's a new thing to him. So it would appear that this Thor is the actual Thor from the 616 universe, having traveled through the energies of Onslaught to the Reborn universe. Remember, during the Industrial Revolution, there was a quick flash of Onslaught witnessed at the Gamma Core. Does this core represent a hole left in reality by the destruction of Onslaught? A mystery to be sure, but right now the Avengers are still reeling. Thor explains that he remembers a great battle, a heroic sacrifice, and a final ending. Cap informs him that no, they aren't dead and in Valhalla, they're in the nuclear reactor core of Avengers Island. And if Thor had been drinking, he'd have spit it out. A nuclear reactor just off of Manhattan? Are you guys crazy? Cap agrees, despite previously seeing no problem with this idea. Despite being unsure about the reactor, the Avengers take off in search of answers. After ditching the Avengers at the end of the Masters of Evil fight, Hawkeye is thinking over their situation. He's still annoyed with Cap's leadership and laments the lacking swordsman. That's when Loki, dressed like a modern human, appears, inviting Hawkeye to his team. Hawkeye immediately turns him down. But, out of curiosity's sake, who is on your team? The Scarlet Witch then wraps her arms around Hawkeye, suggesting he could be their leader. She likes a man in charge. Hawkeye is thrown for a loop by this. The last time he saw Wanda, she was attacking him. But Wanda will be happy to show Hawkeye all the recent changes she's undergone. Loki leaves them to get to know each other. I hate this scene. The first is because the Scarlet Witch definitely feels like the youngest character in the Avengers, as stated in the first issue. She's concerned about fashion, she's boy crazy, she's like the smallest, thinnest of all the characters. Now, I know that her age isn't confirmed, and I know as a reader that Hellcat's mind is in Wanda's body, and Hellcat was always written in this as being pretty frisky. But it still boils down to her using Wanda's body to seduce Hawkeye onto the team. And to be clear, there is lots of flirting here, but no nods to or mention of actual sex. No one does anything blatantly sexual. It's just gross in concept to me. My second problem is Hawkeye going bad. Now, Hawkeye's hunger for leadership is nothing new. When he first joined the Avengers in the 616 universe, Hawkeye spoke pretty regularly about how good a job he would do as leader. Even after the heroes return and Hawkeye rejoins the Avengers proper, he still chafes at not being in charge. That drive and ambition is part of what drove him to take charge of the Thunderbolts, one of my personal favorite comics. So there is something to this. But having Hawkeye's ambitions drive him to siding with Loki is such a low point. If I knew that this book continued past issue 12, thus giving Hawkeye a chance to realize his mistake and side with the Avengers, I'd be much less disappointed. And hey, I don't know, maybe that happens. So perhaps it's more to say that this isn't a bad plot point, it's just one I don't like because I like Hawkeye as a good guy, not a bad guy. So it turns out that Cap, Thor, and Iron Man headed over to the Baxter Building to consult with Reed Richards. Smart move, Cap. They explain what happened, and even the heroes say that the Gamma Core was destroyed, but has returned, so it's definitely not a continuity error, it's a plot point. I'm so used to continuity errors in this point that I just thought you screwed up, Mr. Simonson. But no, it is part of a plan. Sorry for doubting you, sir. Reed suggests that Avengers Island might house something more dangerous than, and yes, it was a stupid idea, a nuclear reactor off of Manhattan. It sounds like a rip in the fabric of space-time. The reactor itself might be some kind of dimensional bridge or a white hole. Iron Man suggests that the visions they saw of the Adaptoid and other villains must have been the Terror creating them. This leads to him reasoning that perhaps this Terror also created some of the heroes, bringing their very humanity into question. I like Tony bringing this up, given the recent doubts he had over Rebel O'Reilly in his own book. But Reed comments that no, this isn't fake people versus real people, more like people from different neighborhoods meeting. In any case, the guy who knows the reactor best is Bruce Banner, who's still missing, which means that all of this actually happens before Tony and Reed's discussion over the nature of Rebel's existence in Iron Man issue 11, so my earlier thought doesn't really fit this scene. Ah, well. Loki meets with Thor and the Enchantress. The reborn Thor cries at how bored he is. He wants to go a Viking, man. And Loki says that's cool, that's what he wants too, which Thor knows he can't trust because he's Loki, so Loki naturally says that Thor shouldn't trust him. But if Loki betrays Thor, he promises that he'll allow the Thunder God to crush his skull with Mjolnir. Thor readily accepts. And if you think that's a stupid deal, mythological Loki's made worse ones. The deal set, Loki suggests that Thor and the Enchantress celebrate, nudge nudge wink wink, while he irons out some details. So again with the creepy, Loki uses a female ally to sexually win over another ally. Blech. The Scarlet Witch is one of the most powerful Avengers. The Enchantress is a flippin' goddess. And that's the best use we could come up for them in this story? That's lame. There's then a waste of 2 pages in which Fury and his team discover Kang's ship, learn that it's Loki who's been disappearing people, and Fury takes off to warn the Avengers about it. This sequence tells us nothing that we as an audience didn't already know, and establishes nothing of importance. Fury's pilot is one Lieutenant Cruz, a cute nod to Top Gun by penciler Michael Ryan. This does explain why Fury didn't show up to arrest the Masters like he did with the Legion, but it also ignores the fact that Fury was upset with the Avengers over the destruction of the Vision. Remember, Fury ordered his men to track the Avengers, and we've been shown that he's a pretty hands-on leader. The idea that he'd tell S.H.I.E.L.D. to track them so that he could yell at them, then leave for flippin' Peru, only to turn around and fly straight back to Avengers Mansion is ridiculous. And it's still what he does. Fury joins the Avengers as they're recapping the whole Vision is a spy tool thing. He meets Thor Classic and tells him that he only just got a report of Reborn Thor trashing a bar in Chelsea. Thor Classic heads off to deal with him, giving the rest of the team a chance to watch Fury's tapes. They recognize Loki, guess that he's the one who's bugged the Vision. That's confirmed by the Scarlet Witch. Before Iron Man can attack, Cap stops him. Wanda contacted Cap after she went with the Enchantress in order to share info and spy on the goddess. But this isn't the same Wanda, and she kisses Cap, distracting him long enough for Hawkeye to hit him with an arrow. Before we get into the fight, I'd just like to mention that both the Witch and Hawkeye get new costumes. Hawkeye is now in his classic purples, wielding some kind of energy arrows. The Witch is in her second new outfit, actually, the first debuting at the end of issue 7. I particularly liked that costume. She has her head tiara crown thing, a billowing cape, and her costume is alternating deep reds and soft pinks. It's sleeker and feels more modern, but covers her up at the same time. This newer costume, however, is more tailored towards Hellcat's taste. She now has deep cleavage, an exposed stomach, and parts of the costume that were pink are now black. The color scheme looks more like what you would expect of a female supervillain, and I like that Hellcat's personality is being displayed as well. Iron Man charges at Hawkeye, but he's swatted aside by Reborn Thor. He's had enough wenching, it's time to fight. Ant-Man and the Wasp try to take down the Witch, but the Enchantress manages to snag a kiss on Pym, sending him into a bliss state. While the Wasp dodges Hex blasts, Hawkeye pinpoints her in mid-air, taking her down. Cap rams into him then, while Iron Man tries to hold his own against Reborn Thor. It looks like he's about to be smashed open when Thor Classic bursts into the scene. As the fighting continues, Loki takes in the chaos. How could there be 2 Thors? How unfair is this reality? The presence of Thor Classic forces him to move up his plans. Loki was going to absorb the Avengers after they'd been beaten, but now it's just too risky. He flies to Avengers Island and directly absorbs the energy from the Gamma Reactor. Bristling with energy, he declares the beginning of the Age of Loki. Quick side note, we've seen an Age of Apocalypse, an Age of Ultron. Why not an Age of Loki? I'd read that, Marvel. Rather than a mutant post-apocalypse or a robotic post-apocalypse, we'd get a Viking post-apocalypse. That sounds badass to me. Issue 11 wastes no time picking up with Loki growing into his powers. Literally. Like his frost giant ancestors, he is a giant now, big enough to get even the attention of the fighting heroes. Glad to see that their ally has succeeded, Reborn Thor and the Enchantress rush to his side. But, and I love this line from Loki, he declares that he likes monotheism best. He blasts the pair out of the sky, then does the same against the Avengers. Pretty much triumphant, Loki cackles as he moves further into New York City. The Avengers gather up their fallen foes and they regroup inside Avengers Mansion. With Loki having turned on them, Hellwanda, Reborn Thor, and Amora the Enchantress, only now getting her first name added, have nowhere else to go. As the group mopes, Ebony, aka Agatha Harkness's familiar, which is currently possessed by Agatha, pounces on a mirror near Hellwanda. A flash of emerald magic reveals Hellcat's reflection in Wanda's place. The tear in the spell sucks Hellcat out of Wanda's body, appearing to kill her. Wanda explains about Ebony, and Amora steps in, reversing Loki's spell. In an instant, the Black Cat transforms back into Agatha Harkness. Now, this is technically wrong, as Agatha merely possessed Ebony's form, but let's all assume that Agatha's body was not only freed from the tree she was imprisoned in, but transformed into a new body for Ebony. Wow, that is a long and weird sentence. Captain America then checks on Hawkeye, who appears to be convulsing on the floor. Amora says that he's fighting against Loki's hold over him, but she can't help him. Freeing him wouldn't just break the spell, it could possibly harm Clint as well. We get to see Hawkeye's face, finally, and I'm pretty underwhelmed that it's a normal male face. Hawkeye has been pretty adamant about maintaining his privacy regarding his looks, so learning that he's a regular-looking dude is a bit disappointing. The two Thors chat. Thor Classic says that Reborn Thor reminds him of Hercules, a fellow Avenger in a previous life. It's a pretty apt comparison. Hercules is brave if arrogant and a bit too ready to get drunk and throw down. Reborn Thor laments, wishing for battle, glory, and honor. Thor Classic reminds him that Loki is still out there, and with the power he has, it might be impossible for the Avengers to stop him. For the first time since Awakening, Reborn Thor looks pensive, nervous, perhaps a touch guilty about all of this. It's a nice moment, and it does a lot to show the depth of Thor Classic. It's perhaps the best single character moment that Reborn Thor has gotten so far. Leave it to a classic Thor writer to nail the Thors in this book. Having had some time to think, Iron Man lays out a plan for the Avengers. Loki previously tapped into the reactor to create the enemies that the Avengers have fought, only now he's using that power for himself. So in order to stop him, the Avengers must break the connection and then beat the power out of him. Now, hold the phone, Tin Man. The revelation that the bad guys were constructs of Loki makes sense, but it is a big jump in logic here. There have been no clues that Loki was creating the villains, but I guess it does explain a lot of small inconsistencies. That's why Whirlwind was alive. The real Whirlwind did indeed die in Iron Man, but Loki just created a new one using reactor energy. But is this why Loki was feeding on the villains to gain that reactor energy back? Because he consumed MODOK, Zemo, AIM agents, and the Swordsman too. He also said last issue that he'd planned to absorb the Avengers as well, so how does that work? Can anyone in the Reborn universe be turned into mist and inhaled, or just reactor constructs? Or did everything spring from the reactor, allowing Loki to convert at will? I'd been kind of thinking that the reactor was tied to the spot where Onslaught died in the 616 universe, like a lingering hole in reality. Or maybe it could have been the physical wellspring of Franklin's imagination, where everything literally came from. So it's a bit disappointing to learn that neither of my guesses were correct, or have anything to do with anything that's going on. Dang it. The Avengers return to Avengers Island and discover that Loki has erected a magical force field around the reactor. Not even the two Thors tossing their hammers can bring it down. Cap realizes that brute force isn't going to win the day. They need to be smarter than that. The first stage in their plan begins when a gigantic Odin challenges Loki. Where did this guy come from? Odin strikes him with Mjolnir, having come to collect on Loki's bargain with reborn Thor. As the pair fight, we pull away and discover that Odin is a magical construct of the Scarlet Witch, the Enchantress, and Agatha. While the sorceresses distract Loki, the rest of the Avengers prepare to drain the reactor. Both Ant-Man and Iron Man reconfigure their suits to store as much energy as possible. They wait for Odin to land a powerful enough blow, forcing Loki to recharge and drop the force field. That's when they step in, draining the reactor of its energy. Loki realizes immediately that something is wrong, and so he unleashes one final blast at Odin and knocks him down. Rather, it downs reborn Thor, around who the spell had been cast. Drastically drained, but still pretty powerful, Loki charges off to get revenge. His last attack also knocked out Wanda and Agatha. Amora is still standing, although barely, and makes her way to warn the Avengers. She doesn't make it in time. Loki tears the roof off, ranting like a tried and true supervillain. The Wasp does her classic fly into an ear and attack it move, which is then built upon by some shield helicarrier laser blasts. Hell yeah! Why doesn't the helicarrier get to save the day more often? Captain America takes over from there, engaging Loki until Ant-Man, Iron Man, and Thor Classic are supercharged with nuclear energy. They unleash on the God of Lies and burn him out of existence. It feels super dramatic and fly by the seat of your pantsy, but it all works and feels really satisfying. Thor Classic flies to the side of Reborn Thor, comforting him in his final moments. Reborn Thor is ready to go. That battle was one heck of a fight. How better for a mighty warrior to earn his place in Valhalla? Thor Classic hopes that this is true, calling his brother from another reality worthy. The final scene is kind of a quiet epilogue. Captain America visits Hawkeye in the hospital. Clint is ashamed of his actions, aware that his arrogance is what gave Loki the opening. Cap forgives Hawkeye for his own weaknesses, aware that he was being manipulated. Speaking for all of the Avengers, Cap wants Hawkeye back as soon as possible. Clint promises that he's coming back, and he'll remain in the Loki costume, a reminder of his shame. So, hey, way to throw my doubts back at me, Mr. Simonson. Nicely done. And with that, we have finished the Avengers. I have to admit, while I found Simonson's beginning very jarring, he managed to win me over by the end. Other than some odd choices in logic or small incorrect details, this came together pretty well. My big questions got answered, we got some character depth where there was none previously, and I like how everyone came together in the end. I'm still puzzled as to the mystery of the Gamma Core and how it ties into the fabric of the Reborn universe, but hey, maybe they can wrap that up in the Heroes Reunited crossover? I'm skeptical, but it could happen. I do have to say that I would have loved to have seen more of a focus on the idea of a previous Avengers team, which could have given Hawkeye, the Swordsman, and Hellcat some more depth and character. The inclusion of Thor Classic was a good way to throw me for a loop, but it also feels like a cheap way to squeeze a dramatic death into the book. It did help flesh out Reborn Thor some more, but he was such a one-note character for the entire book, save for that weird, odd love story with Mjolnir that went nowhere, that it comes as a too little too late. Ultimately, this run of issues has some powerful flaws and has a lot of untapped potential, but it does come together well. Is this the best Avengers book I've ever read? Absolutely not. Is it the worst Avengers book I've ever read? Possibly. Wow, do I feel bad saying that. I've been collecting the Crossing crossover event lately, which is the last Avengers event before Onslaught, and it is supposed to be super crappy. So maybe that will end up taking the top spot, but for now, yeah, this was bad. But let us not dwell on bad comics past. This is where we push forward. Galactus is coming to Earth, and the planet is really not ready for it. Plus, this will be the first time that the whole gang gets back together. So prepare yourself, folks. Next time, the heroes are getting reunited. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.